I'm going to show you 10 ways to assertively communicate boundaries in conversations. If you're keeping track, this is part 5 in a 5-part series about assertive communication training. I'll put links to all 5 parts in the description below this video. I strongly believe this video on how to communicate boundaries belongs in a series on assertive communication because some people, maybe you, have what I think is an unhealthy mindset that incorrectly says, other people get to decide what my boundaries are. And there's a related mindset that says other people's feelings are my responsibility. And when we think this way in conversations, we routinely let people cross our boundaries, whether they're intentionally doing it or not. We sometimes pick up these incorrect assumptions about boundaries because maybe that's how people handled our boundaries when we were younger, or perhaps even as adults in the workplace. But I'm here to share a different message. The reality is the only person who can communicate and maintain your boundaries is you. It's up to you to know what your boundaries are, communicate them, and maintain them. The first 5 tips are all assertive but lean toward a little more gentle approach. They give the other person the opportunity to voluntarily back down without a direct rejection. I'll typically start here for normal people in conversations who are crossing a boundary, perhaps unintentionally. And then the second group of 5 are much more direct, so you're ready for any situation you face when you feel you need to communicate your boundaries. And we're going to assume in all of these examples that the other person is asking you for something either directly or indirectly, or they simply stepped over a boundary with their actions, and you need to respond or react to their boundary crossing attempt. First, sometimes a blank look and a few seconds of silence is often all it takes to steal the other person's confidence and make them question themselves. This works best for very minor boundary issues. If you want to intensify this a little bit more, exhale noticeably. Together, it looks and sounds like this. Or, when you do this, the other person will sometimes say aloud, "Oh, I can see you're not into this idea." A friend of mine did this to me on the phone when I was younger. Those few seconds of silence made me say to myself, man, he is not buying into this. I couldn't see his facial expression on the phone, but I could picture it. And if you do this, the other person may get the hint and voluntarily back off. As mentioned, the first 5 of these tips lean toward the gentle side. The first tip is completely nonverbal. You haven't even said anything, but you've communicated that they've hit a boundary. The same nonverbal quality goes for the second tip that I call the Seinfeld shrug. You do this, and whatever they have done or asked for crosses a boundary, and you want to demonstrate that they've hit that boundary. You look at them with this facial expression, silent shrug, and gesture. Without saying a word, you've communicated that whatever they've asked for or done is not quite cutting it. I call it the Seinfeld shrug because this is an actual tip that he gave to Jimmy Fallon on his show when he asked about how he and Larry David, his co-creator, handled the ideas and pitches from the show's writers. And if they weren't funny enough for the show, they had to communicate that they had hit a boundary with Jerry and Larry. And so they stumbled on this shrug technique. Without saying a word, Seinfeld said this would usually cause a reaction from the other person that they would say, you know what, you're right. The idea is not there yet. I'll keep working on it. And sometimes they add a little or exhale noticeably to add emphasis. So you can practice this one with me. It's a little bit fun. Third, say, let me think about that for a minute, and then pause for several seconds. This is a verbalized version of the first tip where you just pause silently. Now, as soon as you say this and pause silently, they have already likely accepted the possibility that you're going to say no or maintain whatever boundary they want to cross. In that silence, they may even speak up and voluntarily withdraw their request. If they do withdraw their request, just say, I think you're right, I'm really not interested. But in most cases, the initial statement of let me think about that for a minute does most of the heavy lifting in terms of communicating your boundary because it communicates that they have come up against it. Fourth, the slightly stronger version of this is to simply say, I'll have to get back to you about that. This works exactly the same way as the previous tip, but it immediately takes all of the pressure off you to respond right away. A few years ago, I was offered a very prestigious professional opportunity from somebody who I respect. I instantly knew I was not interested, but I felt as if it would have come across as a little dismissive to immediately reject the other person, and it wasn't a time-sensitive request. So I thanked him for thinking of me for this specific opportunity, and I let him know that I would be sleeping on it and I would get back to him. The next day, I sent him a grateful email to let him know I was not interested in the offer at this time. The statement, "I'll have to get back to you about that," will work about 90% of the time. Every once in a while, you'll face a pushy person who will then ask for an answer on the spot. And this happened to me a few years ago in another situation. And if they do that, they've just made your life even easier. Just say, "I'd like to take more time to think about it, but if you need an answer right now, then my answer is no." And if that sounds too direct for you, remember, they are the one who put you on a spot. The fifth tip is a verbalized version of the Seinfeld shrug. You can say any version of, "I'm not sure about that," "I'm not convinced," "I'm not sold," or "that doesn't check all of my boxes." One of the reasons I like this option is that you're saying perhaps this boundary is not permanent or it might be negotiable if the situation changes more in your favor. In fact, I've said that phrase or phrases like this authentically before, and the person has come back to me later with an even better offer a couple days after that did check all the boxes. That wasn't my intention, but assertive communication and negotiation often go hand in hand. Let's do a quick internal recap of the first 5 ways to communicate your boundaries. I've arranged these from what I see as the least intense to the most intense of these first 5, and then the next 5 on the list cross over into what I would say are very assertive and don't leave a lot of room for interpretation. Number 6, say, "That's not going to work for me." This is important that you don't feel the need to add details, justification, or little apologies when you're drawing a boundary line. Adopt a mindset that you don't owe them a reason for maintaining your boundary. Extremely pushy people will often take what you say and try to use it against you. If you say, "That's not going to work for me because I have a writing project I'm trying to finish," a pushy person might come back and try to use that to undercut your excuse. "I thought you had already finished that writing project," or "You can work on that later." If you sense that someone is trying to cross a boundary in that pushy way, don't explain yourself or justify your boundary. Let's practice this one out loud. Say it with me a few times and put a definitive period at the end of the sentence with no additional explanation. "That's not going to work for me." That's not going to work for me. One more time. That's not going to work for me. You can use this in endless situations where you need to draw a clear boundary. 7th, explain what would make you interested. You can add this one to any of the previous tips. You could say, "I'm only interested in blank," or "I prefer blank," or "Here's what I'm looking for," and then fill in the details. So if they've made a request or they've tried to cross a boundary of some sort, this is where you would say assertively what you are looking for in the situation. If they took some action or did something that comes up against your boundary, you can also call that out first by using this starter statement, "I noticed that," and then you identify the specific behavior that challenged your boundaries, and then you can follow up by talking about what you want or prefer instead. This is all about communicating your expectations, boundaries, and requirements. Let me finish those starter sentences with more details so you can hear how it should sound together. "I noticed that," then you fill in the blank. "I'm only interested if you can do it in July," or "I prefer to attend the Zoom meeting from my home office," or "Here's what I'm looking for, more autonomy and creative freedom." Now, my examples probably don't relate at all to what you might be needing right now in this moment for your own situations, but I wanted you to see how you can start sentences clearly and communicate your interests so the other person knows exactly where you're coming from. And those sample starter statements will help to make your point assertively. Number 8, say it directly. "Hard pass, not interested," or "No thank you, not interested." "Heck no, no way, not happening." Clearly, this is pretty direct, but also keep in mind, people are trying to cross your boundary and they'll not likely be hurt by what you say because aggressive, pushy people are used to communicating this way. Direct communication feels normal to them. Also, keep in mind, you can always lighten it up a little bit if you don't want to be quite as direct by adding an authentic sense of humor. My wife and I were hanging out with some friends not long ago, and we asked the couple if they were interested in going sailing. The wife and the other couple said, "Oh, hard pass, not interested at all." But she said it with a chuckle and a playful expression on her face that communicated a sense of humor. It turns out she gets very seasick and had good reason to be direct about her boundary, but her playful attitude made her direct answer easier to hear. Number 9 is to simply say absolutely not. This is direct as you get. The reason you may not want to soften this with humor is that some people may try to cross a boundary that simply should never be crossed, not even attempted. Maybe they're asking you to lie for them or do something unethical. If they're trying to cross an important boundary that any reasonable person would find objectionable, let them feel the discomfort of a direct rejection. Oftentimes, people who are routinely trying to cross boundaries will keep trying unless they get shut down completely. So I'm grateful I almost never have to use this absolutely not statement, but it's good to know that I can be direct in situations when it calls for it. If you'd like to pause and practice saying absolutely not out loud a few times, say it with confidence. Absolutely not. It feels very empowering. And number 10, if you already know what your boundaries are and feel as if somebody in the near future may try to cross them, then communicate them up front ahead of time. I want to be clear about my boundaries, or here are my expectations. I consider this to be the most assertive on the list, not because it's harsh, but because it's proactive. It's best to communicate expectations, boundaries, and other non-negotiables up front when a situation is new. That's why, for example, landlords spell out exactly what the boundaries are in their written lease agreement with new renters. When managers hire new employees, they spell out the exact expectations very clearly, or at least they should. As a professor, I do this every semester at the beginning by letting everybody know what the boundaries are in terms of attendance, late assignments, and other policies that some students eventually attempt to cross. Granted, not everybody loves it when they're eventually held accountable to those expectations and boundaries, but everybody appreciates hearing what the rules are before the game starts. Here's a summary of the top 10 ways to communicate your boundaries assertively. They're moving from the most gentle to the most direct. And as we did a couple of times, it's a good idea to practice these so you get very comfortable with you. That way, the next time you need to do it, the statements and nonverbal cues will feel more comfortable, familiar, and come across as confident on your part. Even a few practice reps for some of your favorites on the list will make you sound confident and assertive in the moment. And if you've made it this far and watched all 5 videos in the series, let me know that you've gone through the whole thing in the comments below, and I'll make sure to give you some encouragement and a heart for all of your hard work. Till next time, thanks, God bless, and I'll see you soon.